So essentially, we're going to work with the compassion key, which is a very simple yet quite powerful tool that's built all around self-directed compassion. So I will essentially lead you through a process where you're going to give yourself compassion in a really specific way. And what's happening when you do that is we're clearing at the karmic layer. I can't even explain why it works at the karmic layer, but it just does. Somehow the compassion frequency is exactly the inverse frequency of the karmic frequency, so it breaks up and dissolves our karmic imprints and distortions. So it works at the karmic layer, and then also very often it's working to heal inner child, healing past lives, emotional healing. It works at some other layers as well, but I usually refer to it as primarily a karmic tool. And the way this works is essentially we go through compassion phrases, which all start with the words, I'm so sorry. And we're saying things like, I'm so sorry, you. And even though it's like you're standing outside of yourself, you're in your highest self or your most compassionate heart, sending compassion back inward towards you and all the little wounded parts inside, past lives, wounded children, whoever, whatever wounded aspects of your consciousness might need it. So you do use the word you. And I'll just lead you through the process. When we use the word I instead of you, oftentimes it means we're really working on an imprint that's either pretty deep or that essentially, if we think of that we have all these little wounded aspects of our consciousness, what I often refer to as wounded fragments, right? Some of the fragments are bigger than others. And when we're working on a large wounded fragment, it can be so large that we really identify with that. So even though you're hearing the word you say I, because in that moment, you're in that fragment, you're in that wounded place. And what we're doing is we want to say you because we don't want to be in the fragment. We want to be outside the fragment, sending the compassion inward to heal that wounded aspect and the associated imprint. Does that kind of make sense? Covering some of the basics about what we're doing and what's happening. So when we say these words like, I'm so sorry, it's heartbreaking here, for example, we're uncreating this part of our reality, right? So when we clear karmic imprints and distortions, they don't need to project outward onto the mirror of physical reality anymore. So when we're saying these phrases, I mean, they might feel true right now, they might feel true often for some of us, but we're not necessarily saying that these are statements of truth, right? What we're saying is that some wounded part of us had that subjective experience in such a deep way that it etched a little imprint, on or close to our soul, let's say, right? So we're uncreating that. So when we say, I'm so sorry, this whole thing here, this whole experience here is so heartbreaking, there's a wounded part of you that had that experience somewhere. Or maybe sometimes it's just in the collective and it's attached to you in some way. But one way or another, we're clearing that out of your field. So now in your reality, it's like, everyone I think on this call is pretty familiar with the idea that we create our own reality. I highlight that or modify that a little bit by saying, everything that shows up in our field is either one of two things, with a couple exceptions. But for the most part, it's either our soul's true light projecting into form so that we can experience our soul's perfection here in the physical earth plane, or it's a karmic distortion. That's it. It's one or another. And so, each soul is different. Each soul's highest expression, each soul's pure light looks different, shows up in different ways, but there are also many commonalities. It's no soul's highest expression to be living in a world where everything is suffering. If we have that experience, that's a karmic distortion. So we say these compassion phrases, we dissolve that karmic distortion. We can uncreate that aspect of our reality. So all of a sudden, our field of possibilities, our field of probability shift, where some rays of light can come in. And those rays of light, it's just our own soul's light. It's just our own soul's light bouncing off of external reality or manifesting external reality, so we can experience a world where it's not all suffering, where they're not breaking our heart 1,000 times, where they can hear us, that we can alleviate more suffering, we can have more joy and completion for ourselves. Does that make sense, John, or how do you feel about that?